everyone, and welcome to Reimagine 2021, brought to you by Mousebell. I'm your co-host, Ashlie Meredith, and today we're bringing you version 9.0 of our virtual conference series, Game of Chains. We're looking at all the latest innovations in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and asking, what's next? Will a new chain take the throne? And if so, who will it be? I'm excited to be joined by Evan Kuo. He's the co-founder of Ampleforth. Welcome, Evan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having us. We just went cross-chain, so I'm excited to talk about this game of chains that you have going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And for anyone who's just tuning into our series, Evan has been on the show multiple times before. Definitely encourage you to head over to our YouTube channel, Reimagine 2020, smash that subscribe button, and check out all of our other great interviews with the Ampleforth team. Kind of learn, dive deep. We did a DeFi event. You can dive deep into how their protocol works and all of the progress they've made up to now. And I know you have some new announcements to talk about as well. But I thought for people who haven't heard this before, and I don't think we've talked about it on our show, Mousebell has a university program. We've engaged with 100 universities in 24 countries. I talk to students every day who are looking to get into the blockchain space and coming from all sorts of different backgrounds. So I always like to ask people, what's your background? How did you get on this blockchain path? And do you have any advice for students who are looking to do the same?
Sure, yeah. Originally, my background was in engineering. I went to school at UC Berkeley, did a combination of mechanical and computer science. So doing some kind of research at school on robotics and such. And over time, I got increasingly drawn into software. So ended up in the startup world. I was first introduced to Bitcoin pretty early on, and I think incorrectly dismissed it as unlikely to succeed. So I distinctly remember a good friend of mine who is kind of more libertarian leaning was very excited about the paper, and he shared it with me, and I read it. And the first thought I had was like, wow, this thing is so unscalable, right? Like it seems to get slower and slower over time. Like, why would you design a system that way? And secondly, it's like, this thing is really hard to understand. Like, how can I imagine people creating a cash with this, like transacting for goods and services using this, technology? I thought it was an interesting paper, and I supported my friend's interest in it, but then I kind of just let it fade in the background. But over time, as the years passed, like a couple of things started to click in my head, like, because there were these questions of like, why was it designed this way? And it became clear to me that one thing that the Bitcoin protocol succeeded at was the ability to create scarcity in a purely digital context, right? And so, this is something kind of special in and of itself. There's not a lot of scarcity with digital goods like photos and audio and stuff like that. You copy and paste it and it exists like again and again and again on the internet. So the creation of scarcity was really important, and that's part of the design there. And the second thing that stood out was its censorship resistant qualities. So naturally, the fact that it was fully decentralized allowed it to be this money that was a lot like a digital gold. And so over time, I kind of, started to abandon this idea that it was a digital cash. I stopped getting mad at Bitcoin for being less than a digital cash and started being happy for it because it became a digital gold. And I guess around the time Ethereum came out, that's when I started to really connect with Brandon. So my co-founder, whom I'd known for years and always just had, fun kind of puzzle focused technical discussions with, we started to read white papers on a weekly basis because things were really starting to get interesting. And Ethereum being a platform seemed like an invitation to create something decentralized. And as we kind of pursued that further, we really wanted to answer the question of like, what is this technology purpose suited for? Like, what is its ideal use case? And many of the things that we saw, like utilities, and they didn't quite make sense. It seemed like a placeholder for equity in a lot of cases, except for in the case of money. It was very clearly suitable for the design of new monetary assets, as an example of Bitcoin. And so the next natural question was like, what's wrong with Bitcoin? What's wrong with gold, right? What's wrong with a digital gold? Can we do better? Is there anything wrong at all? And that line of inquiry led us to some of our academic advisors at the Hoover Institute, which is a political and economic think tank at Stanford. And some of them have been thinking about these questions for their entire careers. And they stand on kind of decades of knowledge there. And it turns out there are very kind of known issues with fixed supply monies, but they're great for a number of things. They're great because they're great as a refuge from inflation, but it's very difficult to build an entire financial ecosystem on top of it, as we've tried to do under the gold standard and under Bretton Woods. And so in understanding the limitations of fixed supply assets, we created AMPL, which is a non-dilutive cryptocurrency, much like Bitcoin, except it has an elastic supply policy. So rather than the price of the token changing entirely, as the price changes, like the volatility of demand propagates into the number of tokens in your wallet. So if there's more demand for AMPL, you just simply get more AMPL in your wallet. And if there's less demand for AMPL, you get fewer AMPL in your wallet. And for this reason, the AMPL can be used as a unit of account. So you can think of it as a commodity money like Bitcoin that's kind of non-dilutive, but it can be used as a unit of account. So that became kind of the premise of our thinking. And now AMPL is starting to become a building block as part of this DeFi ecosystem.
So super interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like you really kind of took this philosophical approach. And, I have a master's degree in philosophy. I was a philosophy professor before I got into Bitcoin or into blockchain. And yeah, it really seems like you were kind of taking this first principles approach of like, what is money? How are different forms of money more or less useful to people? You're talking to academics at Stanford about economic theory. So were these problems that you were always kind of interested in? You said you started in, mechanical engineering, got into software. What was it about a new form of money that really attracted you to this space?
I mean, there was something really special about Bitcoin. And as I thought about it more, I mean, Brandon and I both kind of share this desire to create something that can outlive ourselves, right? He's a really, really good engineer, and he's, gone to heroic efforts to scale systems at like Google and Uber. And Brandon will be the first to acknowledge that like one day, every line of code he's ever written there will be gone, right? It'll be completely replaced. So how can we encode a system of values or a set of rules into something that could outlive ourselves? And there was something really special about the quality of Bitcoin. The creation of digital gold is actually, really special. Like we had digital fiat for a long time, right? We've had fiat money since, the Industrial Revolution. We've had this ability as humans to create banks and paper money for a long time. But we were never able to create gold. Gold is like a natural resource, right? That Isaac Newton famously obsessed with alchemy, toiling away, in a basement. I mean, that's a real profound achievement, actually, I would say, to have created a digital gold. And that's kind of what I meant by like, I stopped getting mad at Bitcoin for not being, more like fiat, like a digital cash, and then started getting really happy and excited for Bitcoin for being a digital gold, because that's actually the more profound accomplishment, in my opinion, anyways. And so in learning more about commodity monies, it just really seemed to fit this kind of goal of creating something that could outlive us, something special.
Yeah, a system of monetary policy that, will make sense and keep working for a long time. And that's what Bitcoin has done, right? What's released into the world.
And rules-based system.
Yeah, the rules were such that it could perpetuate itself and keep working. Right. So yeah, it's really, it's exciting industry to be in. So I think for any students tuning in, if you're motivated by the same kind of questions, if you want to like create a legacy, this industry really is revolutionizing, how we transact value, and it will, I think it will only continue, and new products will be released, but it's a really exciting industry to work in. So, but any other advice for students who may have a similar background to you, or what would you say to them?
I would say I see this huge gap in the space where we have a lot of bottom-up thinkers, right? Engineers, right, who understand a system of language and rules and are trying to extrapolate their understanding of a very specific, like kind of inductive reasoning, creating this really big worldview from a simple set of rules. And then on the flip side, you've got these economists, right, who are very kind of top down, kind of trying to deduce what's going on based on kind of, centuries of financial history and such. And what I learned is that Ample lives right in that in between where you need to have some understanding of this top-down view of the world and an understanding of this bottom-up view of the world. And that's really been advantageous. Like we paid dearly for that top-down knowledge. We got academic advisors who really grilled us and challenged us quite a bit. And it's been the source of a great deal of insight. And so if you're technical, I would encourage you to pursue some coursework in economics. And vice versa, if you're kind of more economically driven or finance driven, I would encourage you to pursue coursework in engineering and try to really meet where those two intersect. It's such a small intersection, but it's also really powerful.
Yeah, I love how interdisciplinary blockchain becomes. It's like the students that we work with, what you would expect, about 60% engineers, but there's also psychologists, environmentalists, philosophers, and I've always been kind of a jack of all trades type of person. So it's nice that you can only benefit from picking up a little bit. If you're coming more from the top down view, try to build your skills in the other direction and vice versa. So great advice for our students. And again, anyone who wants to learn more about Ampleforth, we've got a bunch of interviews with Evan on our YouTube, but for anyone tuning in, I also want them to get the opportunity to really understand what Ampleforth is, what you guys have been doing. Before we get to some of the newest updates, why don't you give us the basic intro to Ampleforth?
Yeah, I'll just give you the simple protocol, and from there, we can have a good conversation, I think. And the key thing to know about the Ample is it has a price target. So each Ample is targets the purchasing power of the CPI adjusted 2019 dollar. And what the protocol does is when price, it takes a price information feed, right? And when price is greater than a 2019 dollar, it increases the number of tokens in user wallets proportionally, right? And when the price exchange rate is less than $1, it decreases the number of tokens in user wallets proportionally. And it executes these supply changes by updating this global scalar variable. You can kind of think of it as like a gravitational constant or coefficient of expansion. It's not like a bank where we're like airdropping everybody a bunch of tokens or somehow reverse airdrop and buying back these tokens. It's just kind of the adjustment of a coefficient of expansion. And so it kind of happens magically. So that's kind of the magic of the technology. You're able to increase and decrease the quantity of tokens in user wallets without a transaction between peers. And that's what allows the Ample to be used as a unit of account. So you would never want to say, for example, denominate like a home loan in Bitcoin. Let's just say like 10 years ago, you wanted to borrow $2 million and that was going to be tens of thousands of Bitcoin to be paid over the course of 10 years. Cut to today, you'd be on the hook for billions of dollars, right? If that contract was denominated in Bitcoin. And so it's really poorly suited for contract denomination, particularly long-term contract denomination. But with an asset like Ample, while retaining all the decentralized qualities of Bitcoin, you could denominate a contract. Even if the Ample market cap were to grow tenfold or thousandfold, that would simply be reflected in the number of units you had, not the price per unit. And so you and I could enter into a contract that's denominated in Ample. And it turns out this new financial ecosystem, DeFi, right, alternative to traditional finance, is built on contracts. And so it needs primitives that are decentralized and unbreakable the way Bitcoin is, that can be used in contract denomination. And we start to see a lot of interesting things play out when Ample is used that way.
Absolutely. So is this kind of like a type of stable coin then?
In a way, I mean, it's not stable in the sense that like you can make a lot of money off of holding Ample or lose a lot of money, just like, if you were to speculate on Bitcoin. So it makes no kind of, it doesn't interject. And that's why it can't break. It doesn't assert any sort of supply or demand. It simply maintains that the price per Ample will be 2019 CPI adjusted dollar. And it allows demand to fluctuate as much as possible. It just represents those fluctuations in demand with quantity rather than price. And so it's really meant for denominating stable contracts. It's not a stable coin, but it can be used to denominate stable contracts. And the reason this is important is because like all of the stable coin approaches today, they either rely on centralized custodians or lenders of last resort. They're vulnerable to kind of, they can break by free market forces. So Ample, like Bitcoin, can't be broken by natural market forces, right? And it doesn't rely on centralized banks or custodians. And therefore, it's very similar to Bitcoin, except it can be used for contract denomination. So we really just prioritized like hardiness, right? Robustness.
So in terms of being able to contract in a stable way with Ampleforth, what are some of the use cases you're seeing users use Ampleforth for?
Well, the thing that I'm most excited about coming around the corner is the lending and borrowing platforms. So if you think about asset platforms like Aave, Compound, Cream, it makes the most sense to borrow stable coins. Like if I deposit a bunch of ETH, I want to borrow stable coins like USDC, USDT, because if I don't do that, I won't be certain what my debt obligation is, right? So I deposit a bunch of ETH, I borrow, a few thousand Tether, and I go do something else with it. I know my debt obligation is gonna be denominated in Tether, and I know what I'm gonna have to pay back later. When Ample starts to be used on these lending platforms, it'll be the first non-collateralized asset that actually makes sense to borrow, right? So I could collateralize something like ETH, borrow some Ample, sell it, do something with it, and not worry that a few days from now or a few months from now, I'll suddenly be on the hook for a profound amount of money and get auto liquidated. So it borrows like a stable coin, because anytime you see Ample used in contract denomination, you kind of naturally separate price volatility, which is represented in the contract, from supply volatility. So that's interesting too, because price volatility is naturally like mean reverting. In the case of Ample, it's cyclical. It goes back to dollar. Whereas the supply volatility can be fat-tailed, kind of like normal coins, where it's like you can grow from a $10 million market cap to $1 billion market cap and never go back down, right? So when you start to use Ample to denominate contracts, it has this natural property of separating the mean reverting price volatility from the fat-tailed supply volatility, and that further has interesting phenomena as well. So we're really kind of excited about what's going to happen once we get on some of these lending platforms, which is right around the corner.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting, and what has brought a lot of people into this space recently. Since October, our DeFi event, we invited you all to come speak about that. This whole idea of like a new way of banking that is better than what our traditional products have been. People are able to make more interest on their savings and staking and borrowing with less or more collateral, and yeah, so these like financial services are really exciting. The kind of new stuff coming out. So what else is new for Ampleforth? I know I just saw a recent announcement that you've launched on Binance Smart Chain. You recently went cross chain. You mentioned that at the beginning, at the top of the interview. So why don't you tell our viewers about that?
Yeah, totally. So we, in collaboration with a project called Meter, have bridged Ample from Ethereum to Binance Smart Chain. And that's really interesting, because what it means is like you can send Ethereum, or you can send Ample from Ethereum to BSC, and the daily rebase events, those supply changes that I was talking about, kind of work seamlessly across both those chains. So it's actually kind of the first cross-chain application. So it's not quite the same as like a wrapped Bitcoin, where like you deposit a bunch of Bitcoin into the custody of a contract, and that's just represented on the other chain, and the only thing that matters is when you redeem it back for the original Bitcoin. In the case of Ample, there is a daily supply adjustment, right? It takes Oracle inputs, right? And now it's going to be taking Oracle inputs, not just from Uniswap and centralized exchanges. It's going to be taking Oracle inputs that come from PancakeSwap as well, right? It's going to take these Oracle inputs from activity across multiple chains, and then it automatically reflects the demand for Ample in supply adjustments once per day. There's a once daily rebase, and that rebase kind of just happens automatically and magically across multiple chains. So it is kind of the first cross-chain application out there, and it's kind of just been running smoothly so far. So we're very excited about that, and I think there might be this kind of more generalized need for passing information, relaying information from one chain to another.
Yeah, so for any newcomers to the space, we just did an NFT event last month. I think I'm seeing, friends, musicians who I never thought I could talk about blockchain with are now asking me about NFTs. So for people who maybe don't have a lot of knowledge, maybe they're just dipping their toes in and starting to buy a few tokens here and there. What is important about this kind of interoperability, and why should they care about the fact that the first cross-chain application just launched?
I think it's because we've got Bitcoin and we've got Ethereum proof of work chains, and those are kind of the most stable decentralized approaches today. And I think that that's why Ethereum is a very good kind of settlement chain. It just happens to be really slow, and gas tends to be really expensive. And so if you can offload some of these special purpose computations to other chains that have varying approaches and varying levels of decentralization, then in aggregate, the whole of the space becomes a little bit more healthy. You don't want people like clogging the blockchain with, a bunch of like microtransactions, or, people walking away from microtransactions because the gas fees itself cost more than what you're sending from A to B. It's just not a very healthy flow of value if you're limited in that way. And so we do see a lot of alternate chains, like for example, Binance Smart Chain. It's not as decentralized as Ethereum, but it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster, and there's a growing community of people out there. So you get to access the communities that are developing on these new platforms who have different kind of ideological views. And you get to take advantage of the benefits of some of these chains, some of which are faster, some of which use proof of stake, and you even need these bridging technologies to kind of move assets onto layer 2 solutions as well. And so it is a big deal to see some of these applications like Ampleforth function across multiple chains, because it really feels like that's the future that we're being pulled towards. If this is to become a viable alternative to traditional finance, it really needs to kind of run more efficiently, and interchain kind of functionality is the best bet we have on that thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll kind of dive into that more as we go back to, our theme of like, what does the future look like for Bitcoin and Ethereum? And, will there be an Ethereum killer? And, what are the big third generation blockchains that are coming up? But I wanted to give the viewers a chance to learn as much as possible about Ampleforth and what y'all are doing right now. I think you had another announcement. Kind of one of the most recent things that you've done is launched a governance token. So maybe tell us about that.
That's right. I think maybe 6 weeks ago or so, we launched the fourth token, which is a governance token that decentralizes upgrades for the Ampleforth protocol. And so that's really just something that was a long time coming. We've been on a path towards like progressive decentralization, and the governance token, the community can essentially vote and weigh in on upgrades. And so I think what's interesting about that is people often wonder, they worry that like, okay, Bitcoin's not very upgradable. That's why it's a sound money. It's got this scarcity profile, and you can't really mess with that easily. And that's what I like about it, right? So what does that mean for Ample? That, the community can kind of vote on changes. Like, could we vote to turn it into a banana car, right? Could we vote to turn it, to something like an NFT, right? Like, can we turn this money into something that's not even a money? That's alarming, right? But it's not quite the case. So in our design, it's more compartmentalized. So there's no token upgradability. So you cannot, certain things are set in stone forever. For example, supply increases and decreases will always be proportional, right? So it'll always be a non-dilutive money. Like if you own 1% of the Ample network, you'll always own 1% of network. And you can't like simply vote to, for example, like freeze somebody's assets or transfer assets on behalf of someone else. And so all those token level kind of features are locked in. That's not really upgradable, but there are some, hyperparameters that can be adjusted, like the reaction lag, the rebase reaction lag, which is like a smoothing parameter that determines how sensitive our adjustments are to price changes. And the community can also vote on integrations. Like, so if we want to piggyback an information signal onto a new platform that requires that, they can weigh in on that as well. And so it's really there to facilitate growth in an environment where some of the infrastructural players are evolving alongside us.
Awesome. Well, that's great news. How can people, so Ample AMPL is the actual token for Ampleforth.
Yep.
And then Forth is your governance token. How are people earning these tokens or buying these tokens? And, you know, what kind of people do you expect to want to participate in your network in this way?
We basically looked at people who have participated in on-chain Ample activity. You know, if they were a holder, if they participated as a liquidity provider on Uniswap, if they participated in any of our liquidity mining geyser programs, they were kind of assigned a point or a series of points. And based on that, we carved out a distribution of the Forth token for our community to come and claim. And so most of the Forth token is actually owned by the community. It's owned by folks who have interacted with the network prior to the launch of the token. And for those of you who have ever held Ample on chain, you know, if you haven't claimed it, you can just kind of actually go to our website and claim your Forth token and participate in the governance of the coin, which I think is pretty cool. Beyond that, if like people can also buy the Forth token on Coinbase, on Binance, on Huobi. I mean, we did a day zero launch on Coinbase, and so that created a lot of awareness, and it was quickly listed on a bunch of other major exchanges. So you can pretty much buy that governance token in all the major places. And I guess the other folks that have been interacting with Forth, we've had really good kind of feedback and response from the Coinbase Earn.com program. So that's, you know, for those of you who are new, this program that kind of educates you. I mean, you can kind of, you know, get a couple dollars of Forth in exchange for like answering a couple of quiz questions and learning about, you know, blockchain technology and in particular the Ampleforth ecosystem. That's been kind of really successful for us on Coinbase. I think there are over 2 million folks who have pushed through that program as well.
That's exciting. So you're on the Coinbase Earn program.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, definitely a good resource for, you know, some of the students tuning in and people who are just learning about crypto. You know, head over to Coinbase, set up your wallet, and then you can take a bunch of quizzes, learn more about all these different coins, how they work, how their governance tokens work, and earn some money there. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah. So any other updates you'd like to give our viewers since the last time we spoke, or just, you know, some more encouragement for why people should check out Ampleforth and leave here to go learn more?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg of this whole space. Our academic advisors would say like we're close to like 14th century Venice, and we need to get to 18th century England. And there's a series of kind of financial instruments that will naturally arise along the way. And it's a really good time to get involved in the space. In the case of Ample, I'm very excited about derivatives that will be created on top of that to kind of get us from 14th century Venice to 18th century England. And yeah, I mean, again, Binance Smart Chain is just going to be the first of many chains that we're integrating with. So there's a lot of excitement around the corner there too.
Well, excellent. Then to bring it back to our theme, REIMAGINE 2020 version 9, Game of Chains. You know, recently Bitcoin and Ethereum have been receiving a lot of criticism. Maybe they're not environmentally sound, the transactions take too long, the gas fees are too high. What is the solution? Is it layer 2 solutions? Is there some other chain that's going to beat them out? Are there too many blockchains right now? Are we going to see some consolidation? So just kind of wanted to hear your opinion on the Bitcoin ecosystem, the Ethereum ecosystem, and what you think the future holds.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to be around for a long time because, as I said earlier, proof of work is proven, right? It's stable. And I do see kind of special purpose chains emerging. And I think that we'll start to offload some of those, you know, tasks on these new chains. Some of them will be more environmentally friendly. Some of them will be cheaper for settlement. Some of them will be a lot faster. And eventually there will be some consolidation. You can't just continue creating chain. I mean, Polkadot is the perfect example of this. They created I guess the network of chains, like the internet of chains almost, where like you can more easily kind of create your own chain through them. I think that, the world is going to want to kind of consolidate a little bit of its behavior onto a few of these, but it's too soon to tell, which ones will usurp the others or whether they'll coexist. But I do think Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to be around for a while, and I'm one of those people who's of the opinion that proof of work utilizes electricity by definition. It's not like burning. It's not like hydrocarbons. It's not like we're flying jets across, waters. And it's really about kind of the source of that electricity. And I think that the right types of initiatives will potentially make it more and more reliant on renewable energies rather than, fossil fuels and such. Now, it's hard to guarantee that, but I kind of see that problem sorting itself out a little bit along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Polkadot, but I also wanted to hear from you, besides Ampleforth, what are kind of some of the third generation blockchains that you're following? What kind of projects are you most excited about?
Yeah, right around the corner, we're definitely excited about Matic Polygon, excited about Solana, excited about Polkadot, like I said. And, I'm excited about this bridging platform partner that we've been working with called Meter. I think that they're positioned to do a lot of really good work in the cross-chain world.
Absolutely. So yeah, anyone interested in that, go check out Meter. And yeah, we've got our portfolio of projects. We're a blockchain accelerator. We invest in projects, and they are, a lot of projects are building on Solana and Polygon right now, and it's just exciting to see all the different use cases. Maybe, yeah, just one last question. What, besides decentralized finance, although I think, blockchain is uniquely suited to be good at creating money, are there any other use cases for blockchain that get you really excited, or a particular product that you've seen?
I'm still of the opinion that finance and money is the number one use. Like I said, censorship resistant and scarcity, even with NFTs, which I'm very excited by, that is taking advantage of the scarcity property of these tokens as well, right? I can imbue ownership of a digital file into just one token and sell that. I think that is kind of the cornerstone of value here, where if we were to start using, blockchains for general computing purposes, we might be doing it for economically unsustainable reasons. Like maybe it's not going to be cheaper as a CDN than your Amazon, S3 stack, and maybe it's not going to be faster either. And maybe you don't really need it, to build the next WeChat yet today. So I am very bullish on money, finance, scarcity, censorship resistance.
Well, great to hear. For anyone who wants to learn more about Ampleforth or find you and more of your thoughts and this first principles economic questions that you're asking and trying to solve for, where can they find you? Where can they find your team?
Find me on Twitter. So my handle is at Evan, EVAN, Kuo, KUO, just first and last name.
Excellent. All right. Well, for anyone just tuning in, this has been REIMAGINE 2021 version 9, Game of Chains. We're talking with Evan Kuo, the co-founder of Ampleforth. Check him out on Twitter at Evan Kuo, and stay tuned for more. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks so much, Ashlie.